It is May 27th, 2020, 05272020. My name is Amy, and I'm just here to talk to you about life, and really it's me making my way through life and documenting my journey so that I hope to be of some sort of help to others. So I hope this resonates with you. Take what resonates and leave what doesn't. It's funny because on my way to the park I was thinking, like, what is this even about? And then I remembered that the opening line of my favorite lecture from my favorite philosopher, Alan Watts, goes something like, I find it a little difficult to say what this lecture is about. And so I guess I find that enormously reassuring that, you know, one of the best philosophers in the world might struggle with starting to talk about big things. What this is really about is finding a way to be at peace, finding a way to be unbothered. And so I want to tell you a little bit about my journey. I don't know how long this video is going to go. I could see myself talking for an hour and feel like I've barely scratched the surface of life, man. So I want to give you a little background on myself. I grew up in the Arizona desert. I'm from Tucson. I spent my childhood basically growing up in a planetarium and science center. So while I would say that I was an atheist for most of my life, I nevertheless cultivated a true sense of awe and wonder at the great mysteries of the world and the universe. I've spent my whole life looking up at real and projected stars. I like this format because I can take as long as I want to form my next thought, which is often very important. I think I actually want to address what I basically call the ascension community. For those of you not in the know, this is maybe going to sound like a lot of gibberish, and so I apologize. The thing about breaking into the ascension community and beginning to learn about esoteric wisdom is that I don't know that it ever feels like anything other than drinking from a fire hose. When I first started reading about different types of wisdom, it was filled with words that didn't make sense to me, and I had to spend a lot of time Googling. But I think the best way to start this story is to say that, like many people, my reality abruptly shifted when Donald Trump was elected to office. Essentially, I reacted to it by going, I really don't understand the people around me, and I don't understand why they think what they think. And so rather than what, a lot of people did, and so it should go without saying that obviously I was basically like a liberal East Coast elite without any money, but I had the same mindset. I wanted the NGO white collar job and essentially towed the Democratic Party line, even though I've never been registered as a Democrat, and read the New York Times, read the Atlantic, etc. So when he was elected, I endeavored to figure out why people thought what they thought. And little did I know that I was going to be going way, way down a rabbit hole that helped me, discover and develop my spirituality, but also just helped me realize that there are just whole entire groups of people throughout the world that think very different things. And when you go into the deep dive and try to see what they see, you see that every single system of thought actually has its own internal logic. And so this is where I often get tongue-tied, because when Kellyanne Conway talked about there being alternative facts, like, she kind of wasn't bullshitting. There is this whole realm of, basically what people consider documented evidence that takes a very, very long time to drill down and see what the source material is. And so whole systems of thought are based around this. And what's I found was particularly interesting is that, incidentally, the community generally known as like the alt-right, like the 4chan, 8chan, what are those celibate people called? I don't remember. But, these very aggressive right-wing groups, they actually seem to share a lot of the same ideas in terms of like what they consider facts and reality as like this ascension community, which I found really shocking. It is so hard to even begin to explain how vast this body of knowledge is, if you will. And so this video, I think, is about empathizing with people that are also struggling to make sense of all of this. Having read a bunch of shit for like close to 4 years now, I can summarize in extremely broad brush strokes that there's this whole swath of people that believe there's so much, kind of individual variances on this belief. So I'm really trying to go with the most top level, like the most consistent information I see over and over again in these different communities, which is, generally speaking, they believe that there is, and the funny thing is that the source material for this, interestingly enough, comes from a lot of ancient religions. Actually, a very easy way to summarize it is watch Ancient Aliens on the History Channel. A lot of people believe that Ancient Aliens on the History Channel is completely real. So there is evidence from very ancient cultures about some consistencies about some things. So, for example, the Mayans and the Greeks both talk about what sounds to be like the lost city of Atlantis. They talk about a sophisticated city where there is a great flood. Another bit of ancient history that these people kind of latch onto is, I believe it's the Sumerians, not the Mesopotamians, but the Sumerians supposedly have, they've discovered tens of thousands of clay tablets, and they document what they consider essentially aliens coming from another planet. Some of them think it was this 10th planet that has this very long arc and, kind of comes to our solar system every like tens of thousands of years. It's called Nibiru. It's also called something else. But long story short, the general theory is that there were these groups of aliens, essentially, that came to Earth thousands of years ago, and they went, hey, stupid monkey people, like, we're gods, so mine some gold for us, and we're gonna, edit your DNA and, make you humans and make you slaves. And so people in the modern era sort of believe this mismatch of that and then like stuff from the Matrix, and then they sort of piece together all these other bits and pieces to form this story that in the current day and age, humanity is asleep to the fact that there is this whole intergalactic war going on. Some people think it's happening in this dimension. Some people think it's happening in what's known as called the astral plane or the fourth dimension. Also instrumental to this theory is the idea that there's kind of two specific groups, and I don't know if people think that they're the same thing, but one is referred to as the archons, and the other one is referred to as the reptilians. And so, more or less in both instances, they are considered to be interdimensional beings who have cut their ties to, like, the true source consciousness, the true God. So they're evil. And they traffic humans as slaves on and off the planet, particularly children. And they, freak them out and do all these satanic rituals. And they drink some substance called adrenochrome. And so they actually, if you watch The Dark Crystal, the Jim Henson movie, The Dark Crystal, or the Wachowski sisters movie, Jupiter Ascending, these movies essentially show this plot. So the idea is that, you're turned into a slave, you're put under a trance, and like your essence is sucked out. And these beings who have severed their connection with God, they are mortal, but they basically are trying to live forever and ever and ever by, like, drinking freaked out babies' blood. And so for those of you who have never heard any of this, let's just sit and digest that for a minute, because it's an awful lot. All of the other conspiracy theories kind of come out from this. The 9/11 conspiracy theory will touch upon this. The QAnon theory is heavily interested in this. The Clinton body count, body bag theory, the John Podesta emails, the, Pizzagate and Ping Pong Pizzeria. So if you don't know anything I'm talking about, I'm just throwing out phrases for you to Google. So there's this, grand conspiracy of things, and it's our job to, be aware of negative entities like sucking, attaching black cords to our sacral chakra and blah, blah, blah. And so I say all that to say that I went way down the rabbit hole. I read all this stuff. I read about flat earth theory. I've read about there being, now people think titans are being unleashed from the earth, but, they're not physical titans. They're cloud patterns in the sky, or they are patterns in the mountain ranges and stuff like that vaguely look like dragons or vaguely look like giants or something like that. I have to admit I am sounding a little dismissive because my ego is dismissive of this, but I do want to rein it back and say, for the record, everybody's struggling, everybody's confused, everybody's trying to do the best that they can to figure out what the hell is going on in this reality. A lot of people have been saying this reality is weird since the dawn of time, but now that we have the pandemic, more and more people are finally coming around being like, dude, this shit's weird, like, what's going on with our life? So, if you are one of these people who believe any of this stuff, or you are one of these people that have researched any of this stuff and are feeling freaked out and confused, or if you have no idea what any of this is and this just sounds really crazy and interesting, like, this video is for you. So, the bottom line of why I'm talking today is I want to essentially help myself and help you navigate this stuff. Because the conspiracy theories are becoming more and more out in the public eye. Now that the pandemic's happening, there was some 26-minute movie that came out a few weeks ago called Plandemic, and, like, way more mainstream people watched this than, like, any of these other kind of conspiracy theory videos before. So I'm just going to say for the record, I don't know what the fuck's going on. I don't know if archons are real or not. I don't know if reptilians are real or not. I don't know if Hillary Clinton is a reptilian shuttling babies off the planet. I At this point, honestly, anything's possible. I definitely have my kind of like working theories of what's real and what's not, but really at the end of the day, nobody knows. So what do we do from here? What I have found is finally working for me is just taking a step back from all of that and just getting very back to basics. The types of thinkers that have consistently resonated with me through all of this are people that just kind of keep it simple, stupid. I find Zen Buddhism very comforting in this regard. So I tend to be a fan of Alan Watts. I tend to be a fan of Joseph Campbell, of Carl Jung. In more modern age, my favorite author is a gentleman by the name of Stephen Hared Buhner. I am drawn to nature and naturalism and just being in... Oh, Ram Dass is great too. I am a big fan of Be Here Now, because the way that I see things is that there's no archon walking around in this park. If there is, I'll address it then. If an alien comes and abducts me, I'll address it then. And here's the thing too, is it's really funny because, another part of the reason why I was so drawn into this stuff in particular is that I was really desperately seeking a sense that I was special in some way. And so I wanted to develop the power to see auras. I wanted to develop, I wanted to remember some repressed memory that I was abducted by aliens. And when I really drill into that stuff, for me personally, it's all coming from a sense of I don't feel special. And there's something about possessing this knowledge that can make someone feel very special. I can't speak for anybody else's motivations for doing any of this. Please understand that I'm not projecting myself onto you if you're listening to me and getting offended. You're probably a great person. I'd probably love to have a slice of pizza with you and play some kickball with you. Last year, I was spending a lot of time with people who believe these sorts of things. And while that wasn't the focus of what we were doing, it was constantly in the background for me. So as a result, I probably got more depressed, freaked out, confused, and as a result, just more helpless, tied up, and useless than I ever have been in my entire life. I had so much anxiety. I had nightmares. I was just not, you look at photos of me last year and I look sick. I have a gray pallor to me. I have circles under my eyes. And so I realized that I was just getting nowhere fast by going down all these rabbit holes. So what I'm doing right now is just putting all of that stuff on the back burner and focusing on the here and now. I am listening to my own body. I am looking around and observing with my own eyes. And I am simply navigating my life based on my perceived reality here and now. Now, that isn't to say that I actually really believe in etheric stuff. I believe in synchronicities. But I'm realizing that at least my working theory right now is that most of this stuff is just abstract reflections of the cosmic mind. So in other words, if you think archons are real, they're real. When I thought archons are real, or was really entertaining the idea that they could be real, that was when I was tormented by archons. Archons torment people by thinking about the fact that archons torment people. So in my personal opinion, I think we're manifesting our own reality. Do I think that there's other dimensions with angels and stuff like that? I kind of do, actually. In my dream space, I see some really weird shit. I've had UFO experiences. I've had so many paranormal experiences. It's just hilarious. But it was funny because every time I would encounter them, I wouldn't go, this is a ghost. This is an alien. I would just say, there are lights in the sky. There are lights turning on and off in the bathroom. I hear what sounds like a woman's voice next to me. To me, it's really important to just observe without judgment. When we start to judge phenomenon, especially the really weird ones, we're just going to get ourselves tangled in a knot. Ugh. Okay. So, where am I going with all of this? If you're finding yourself completely bogged down in all of these theories, you have the right to just stop worrying about it and start focusing on the here and now. For me, it's worked out tremendously well. I feel so much clearer. And I'm not sitting here going like, no, this is stupid. It couldn't possibly happen. I'm just not spending this time like going down these rabbit holes, because really at the end of the day, what I think should become very obviously true or obvious to people is pretty much all the stuff that's written on the internet is tainted and mangled as hell. Like, I feel like everything's gotten so confused that everybody has it partially right and everybody's got a lot of stuff wrong. And that's why, like, partisanship and all the arguing just cracks me up. You know, the pandemic's a perfect example. There are people saying, you know, the pandemic is real, wear your masks. And there's other people saying the pandemic is caused by 5G. Don't wear your masks. Oh, by the way, you know, with it being closed, or with everything being shut down, you know, there are problems. There are side effects to that. There are other problems besides COVID, such as depression and anxiety from, you know, people lacking human touch and human connection. You know, there are people losing their jobs and their livelihoods. And to this I say, I personally believe it's not an either or, it's a both and. I work in a grocery store where my employees are getting sick. I've seen them when they come back. Like, they are getting sick, really, with something that is different than the cold or the flu. The pandemic is real. I actually did, you know, give credence to the 5G theory before. I do believe that 5G is probably funky, but when you just start to really just break things down and use your own innate common sense, you can see that the disease is spreading like a transmittable virus, not 5G hotspots. The Wuhan connection, you know, it might just actually be a coincidence, guys. My point in all of that is that I think COVID is real. It's a real virus. It's really some sort of funky respiratory this, that, or the other. And it really freaking sucks to have to shut down our whole country because we didn't have a clear, consistent, agreed upon response. We're having to keep shutting down, keep shut down, and this is prolonging because we didn't have a good response to begin with. And so all of these months, people have been scrambling to come to some degree of consensus of how to deal with this virus. As a result, people are really, really doing poorly in other arenas of their life because they have had to deal with the fact that we did not have a cohesive response in the beginning. The left is right. The right is right. The whole thing sucks. Why are we yelling at each other about masks? Why can't you just wear a little paper mask in the grocery store for 30 minutes? Are you really that hung up on, I don't even know what, like your idea about yourself and your idea of what freedom and liberty is, that you can't just say, hey man, times are funky, I'll just put on a paper mask, we'll go through the little theater of it, this will all be really funny later. But that's just not what happens. And so everybody's at each other's throats because they all have this, in my assessment, half-truth crap that they're all listening to, and they won't just take a step back and go, maybe I don't know the full picture. that rant over. I'm getting by in my life by just focusing on myself right now. What resonates for me in my life? What doesn't resonate for me in my life? I can tell you that as soon as I stopped worrying about archons weren't bothering me. As soon as I started letting go, and so I'll talk about flat earth theory for a second. So some people make the argument that this earth in this plane is literally flat, which all I advise you to do is go out to the Arizona desert and just drive around for a few days. And what I advise that you do is look at these huge power lines. I think they might be transformers. I don't know that much about electricity, but we have these huge power lines. They almost look like a little dude. They have kind of this pentagram shape with little arms sticking out, little legs sticking out. And they're 200 feet tall. I mean, they're just really massive. Another place that would be great is to go to the wind farms, probably in California. So when you're driving, you can see miles long stretch of these telephone poles. And what happens is you can see the pole in front of you, and you can see it from the ground to the tippy top. But as they go back in the distance, you actually notice that you see this much of it, and then this much of it, and then this much of it, and then this much of it. And Arizona is so big and flat that you can actually literally see the progression of these telephone poles disappearing over what would have to be a curved surface, even though it looks very, very flat. So, sorry, it's very easy to see, if you're lucky enough to have lived in the right place, that the earth curves. So I use that example to say that I could have spent all of the time in the world researching like blog after blog and video after video, making this, that, and the other argument. But at the end of the day, I guess what I'm advocating for is just use your own eyes, use your own senses. Tune into your own mind, in your own thoughts, in your own heart, in your own stomach. And just start tentatively navigating your real lived dimensional experience here. The way that I like to think of this reality is, so I'll use it as a parable, which some people think is literal and some people don't. And either way of thinking about it, I think is perfectly fine. I like to think, I am a spiritual person. I do believe in what people call source or God. It's the cosmic complete math formula that exploded in the Big Bang in a burst of unfathomable consciousness and unfathomable love and created this universe. So for starters, to me, thinking that something like an archon or a reptilian or a Martian, some people go that route, to think that something could exist